In Warframe, we have a ton of different bosses. But did you know that there's a hidden endgame activity centered around the hard mode versions of some of these bosses? These hard mode versions are profoundly more difficult than the normal versions due to more punishing mechanics, higher total boss health, and sometimes crazily high damage, which you need to pull through to eventually come out victorious. There's a big chance that you may have already known about these hard modes, but did you also know that there are some flashy glyphs to collect? This is communicated nowhere inside the game, and the only way to figure this out is by either playing those hard mode bosses with a ton of different frames, or by, of course, checking the Warframe wiki. Furthermore, with the damage attenuation changes that have recently been introduced in the Vallis Undermind update, taking down these bosses has become significantly easier. So now is the perfect time to unlock those shiny glyphs and hang them on your wall. Now, before I get into the builds that I use to beat all of these hard mode bosses on any Warframe, let's go over the 3 hard mode bosses with these hidden glyphs available. First, we have the so-called 60 eyes variant of the Murmur boss, called the Fragmented One. To activate the hard mode version of this boss, you have to play in Steel Path, and after collecting 30 eyes from the Vitriums, you need to keep going by grabbing another purifier and going to the newly marked objective. Once you reach the elusive 60 eyes threshold, the boss will become its hard mode version. In this hard mode version, health is significantly increased, damage attenuation is ramped up, and getting hit by the boss will disable all of your abilities for a couple of seconds. And yes, Revenant Slop users, Mesmer skin is also reset, so it's time to actually get good at the game. Oh no! Attacks from the Fragmented One can be easily avoided by always trying to be on the move and staying up in the air above the boss as much as possible. Once defeated, you will get a handsome dolly that you can put on the front of your ship, and you can show it off to your fellow Tenno in the load menus. As for the hidden reward, this boss rewards special glyphs for 6 different frames, namely Mirage, Vauban, Jade, Protea, Sephiroth, and Gauss. To earn these glyphs, you need to make sure that you are playing in solo mode and that you complete the hard mode using one of these 6 frames. If I'm honest, out of all of the hard mode bosses that we have so far, this is in my opinion by far the easiest one. This then brings me to the second hard mode boss that was introduced in the 1999 update, which is the Apex version of the H09 Everfon tank. To spawn this hard mode boss, before each of the barriers, you will have this green-grayish terminal that you need to hack. I advise picking up the transponder in operator form, after which you can go into void mode to grant yourself invincibility so that you won't get downed while hacking. To hack the terminal, you need to complete this small snake minigame. Take note that you can speed up the snake by pressing your jump button. After doing this twice at each of the barricades, you will see the Scaldra icons appear under your loadout on the left side of your screen. When you then go into the boss fight, you will see that the tank is now extra fancy with this dark grey armor and is actually called the Apex variant of the normal Everfon tank. In the first phase of the boss fight, you need to watch out for Harbingers and the tank's green sludge, as getting in contact with either of these will reset your abilities, just like on the Fragmented One. To defeat the tank in this first phase, shoot 6 of the 8 different weak spots found on the sides and on top of the tank. Then loot an RPG from a Scaldra unit and deal damage to its health. Alternatively, you can cheese this by using a slam melee with melee afflictions, but I will get into this when I discuss the builds. Besides this is most likely an unintended interaction and could very well be fixed in the future, meaning picking up the RPGs becomes your best bet. In the second phase of the fight, you need to damage the tank by shooting its weak spots that change location. Again, using something with a big slam range, like the Magistar Incarnon or the Sampotes, can help you destroy these spots more easily. When the health bar in the second phase is either at 2/3 or 1/3, the boss will start healing with Tekrot enemies that come running towards it. By fighting off these Tekrot enemies, you will intercept the healing process, solidifying the damage you have dealt so far. In this phase, there will also be some tentacles that spawn from the ground. Make sure to take them out as they spawn, as the AoEs can become troublesome and deal significant damage to you. Keep on destroying the weak spots of the tank, and you will end up defeating it. For this hard mode boss, using Trinity, Excalibur, Mag, Nyx, Volt, and Cyto9 will reward you with these cool looking 1999 themed glyphs of the Gemini skins of these frames. Then, with the tank being covered, let's jump to the latest boss that has received a hard mode variant, which is 4 on Mercury. Doing hard mode 4 will turn him into Janus 4, which again will grant him a lot more damage attenuation as well as a way higher health pool and higher damage output. This is pretty much the first boss that you run into in the game, and unlocking the hard mode is exceptionally easy compared to the other 2 hard mode bosses that I have covered so far. To unlock hard mode 4, you need to collect special symbols that you can only see when you are in operator mode. These symbols are hidden across the map, and you need to look for a total of 5 to unlock the door. But here comes the fun part. The code that you enter in the console, hidden just before the boss room on the left side, uses the exact same code every time. So instead of looking for all of those glyphs, you can just rush to the boss room and remember this code that I will show on screen for a couple of seconds right now. First, you will have this symbol that sort of looks like the letter D and B combined. Then you will have a Zephyr tornado symbol, a weird one that looks like a pair of headphones, a scrambled capital A, and finally the 666 symbol. Once you enter this code, 4 is upgraded to his hard mode version. Before you enter the arena, it is important to note that the 4 fight is split up into 2 parts. One part is within the first arena, which is rather small, and the second part is on moving platforms, where you can fall in the water and lose all of your active abilities. 4's health bar is split up into 4 segments, each trigger a specific event upon their depletion. When depleting the first segment, 4 will bubble himself and become invincible with a grayed out health bar. Xmas units will spawn that you need to get rid of. Once this is done, his bubble will disappear and you can damage him again to deplete his second health segment. On depletion of the second segment, 4 will then teleport to the next boss room. In the first phase of the fight, 4 will have different attacks. He will spawn grenades that have an AoE which you need to try and avoid. He also has a shotgun-like attack with his gun that deals a ton of damage, and when you see him point up his void key in the air like this, he will spawn electrical bolts that will reset your abilities, so definitely watch out for those. Now, when 4 teleports to the next room, you need to jump or slide over or under these lasers that move towards you in 2 hallways. I can't really give you any specific tips for this, it's just trial and error, and at some point you will get the timings down eventually. Personally, this took me a long time to get used to as well, and I already have booked my flights to Turkey to replace the hairs I pulled out of my head doing this part of the fight. Anyway, once you reach the second boss room, I advise placing down an energy pad before you enter to make sure you are full on energy. Then enter the room and prepare to be slaughtered. At least that's what happened to me many times over before I got the hang of it. This second part has a couple of mechanics that you want to watch out for. Firstly, coming close to 4 can trigger his melee attack that will put you into one of the most insane stun locks I've experienced in the game. So I avoided seeing his ugly face up close at all costs. Then you will see that he will again use the electrical bolts to reset your abilities. However, this time they will be much harder to avoid as they are practically everywhere. Besides this, some of the platforms will be able to become submerged, which means that staying up in the air is your best friend in this fight. And finally, 4 is able to charge these heat-seeking balls that became the bane of my existence in the first few tries. However, luckily you are able to shoot them while he's charging them to disable them, and please, for the love of God, do this, because it makes this fight much easier that way. Now, when you deplete the 4th segment of 4's health bar, 2 turrets will spawn in the walls of the arena. They do have a weak spot, which is in the middle, that you can shoot for massively increased damage, which is what I would recommend you doing. Generally, these turrets don't really deal too much damage, and staying on the move should be more than enough to survive their attacks. During this time, 4 will also hide away in his little bubble again, so the turrets are your main priority. Once the turrets are gone, however, you only need to deplete the final health segment and you are done. As for which glyphs are obtained from this fight, you will have to complete this fight solo with Citrine, Korra, Atlas, Limbo, Hildrin, and Chroma. Okay, now for the builds. To make these fights a walk in the park, I do expect you to have top tier gear, and if you don't, honestly don't bother doing this content yet and keep farming until you are higher on the power curve. Or if you really want to get these glyphs, I mean, feel free to make it feel like an Elden Ring boss. In the end, it's all up to you and how you like to have fun in the game. Anyhow, I have found a couple of mods that were exceptionally powerful for these hard mode fights, and I want to specifically highlight a synergy between 2 mods that almost no one has highlighted in guides so far. This synergy is specifically between the mods Undying Will and Sacrifice. Normally, when you get downed, you will have a 20-second bleed out timer. With Undying Will, however, this becomes 34.4 seconds, which means that your Sentinel will have 34.4 whole seconds to revive you with the Sacrifice mod. Now, you may be thinking, is that 14-second extension from Undying Will really needed? And my answer to that would be, well, yes, sometimes at least. For instance, when your Sentinel has recently died during the boss fight, it might need a fair bit of time before it revives itself. Having a longer bleed out timer in this case will give you a higher chance that this revive can actually occur and you can still finish your hard mode run. Even better is that while you are downed, you could also think about using the Provoked mod, giving you a final 100% damage increase to any damage output that you have, including abilities. And if you manage to kill the hard mode boss while downed, you will be able to revive yourself afterwards, making the penalty of dying practically non-existent. Now, what you will need to pair this with is a relatively short respawn timer on your Sentinel, which you can achieve through using primed regen and several bond mods that can help you reduce the revive cooldown timer. The only thing that is very important to note here, and which I'm not sure of, is that I don't know for certain whether you need the Unairu Focus School and have Last Grasp unlocked. This is because Last Grasp will force you to go into bleed out instead of straight up being game ended. So if this is actually the case, I do recommend that you use Unairu for these hard mode fights. Or if you have the ability to, you can even unlock this passive from being a waybound to have it on any focus school that you desire, which is of course even better. Apart from the incredibly powerful synergy between Undying Will and Sacrifice, I made my Warframe builds to be fully invested into being a shield tank. To do this, I was using Fast Deflection, Vigilante Figure, and Fortitude. On top of this, I used Rolling Guard to assist with resetting shield gates, and I used Arcane Aegis to, in some cases, give me 12 seconds of complete invincibility. Apart from that, I'd still advise you to use Adaptation for the rare scenario that some damage does go through your shield, and if this happens, you will at least most likely not be one-shotted. If you can get away with it on your Warframes, depending on the polarities and mod space that you have, I'd also recommend Airborne Damage Reduction mods, as these will actually help reduce enemy damage done to your shields, as I've explained in my health tanking video. If you go this route, you can think of using Aerodynamic, Aviator, and Boreal's Hatred for its set bonus. Furthermore, something like Arrow Vantage or Boreal's Anguish can become very useful as well to extend aim glide duration and ease of use. For the final arcane that you can choose, you can really use whatever you like. However, a lot of these hard mode boss fights have magnetic damage that completely messes up your energy economy, so I would recommend using Arcane Nullifier in all cases. If we put all of this together for a build on your Warframe, it will look something like this. If you are not able to fit all of these mods, I would advise taking off Arrow Vantage and Boreal's Hatred first. In some cases, I ran builds that had one or even both of these missing, and my survivability still felt completely fine. Then the next thing I want to discuss is the companion I have used. By far the best companion giving you insane amounts of survivability is the Wyrm or Wyrm Prime. The Wyrm can use the Sacrificial mod, as I've explained before, but it also has Guardian that resets your shield gate, Shield Charger that increases your shield recharge rate, Negate that can prevent status effects, and with the Wyrm Prime, you can even use Calculated Redirection together with Reinforced Bond for additional fire rate on all of your guns. Then, if you also use the Vilcax companion weapon, with just a single critical delay, you can activate additional crit damage from Tenacious Bond. Finally, if you really want to min-max, you can also put the entire Vigilante mod set onto your companion weapon that increases the chance of your critical hits upgrading to the next tier, giving you even more damage output. Okay, with the companions covered, let's talk about something completely different, being Helminth Abilities. For Helminth Abilities, it doesn't really matter what you pick, and to be honest, you don't really need a subsume at all. If you, however, want to make things even easier on yourself, I would recommend using Omamori from Kome, which gives you even more options to dodge damage and thus help you with your shield gate. If survivability is not an issue for you, then you can also think about extra damage in the form of Zata's Whisper or Nourish. With the full setup now complete, you can use it to tank any hard mode boss without any worries of dying, but what we still do have to worry about is the point where the boss actually dies. So let's talk about damage and the weapons you can use next. There's a lot of weapons that you can use. but generally building for raw damage, fire rate and multi-shot will give you the best result. This means that weapons like the dual Toxicist Incarnon or Latham are absolutely cracked for taking down these hard mode bosses, and so are shotguns like the Boar Prime Incarnon, Strun Prime Incarnon or Felarx in their non-Incarnon forms. But let's cover the weapon loadouts I used per boss. First, for the Fragmented One. For the primary, I used this Felarx build, which uses a Riven to lower the critical chance to make better use of the Devastating Attrition Incarnon perk. However, this Riven is not really mandatory and can be replaced by Toxic Barrage. For the secondary, I used this Latham build, which also uses the new primed Expel the Murmur mod. I chose to build towards a crit Latham instead of using the Devouring Attrition perk here as well, as a crit Latham with secondary Enervate is extremely powerful. Then for the melee I used the Praedos, which you can leave unmodded, as really the only reason you have it is for its Incarnon perks giving you more parkour velocity for collecting the eyes. Then for the Apex tank. Again, I used more or less the same weapon setup, with the only difference being that you can replace the primed Expel the Murmur mod from before for something like Lethal Torrent or Hornet Strike. The primary stayed the same, but for the melee I used something very important that you need to pay attention to. For some reason, the tank in the first phase of the fight can be damaged with melee afflictions. If you pair melee afflictions with any weapon that has some decent damage and the possibility to do gas damage, you can easily take down the tank in either 3 or 4 heavy slams. However, if you fully want to cheese this part, I'd recommend using the Sempotes that you can use to proc melee afflictions multiple times with just a single heavy slam, which causes the tank to instantly lose all of its health. In the second phase, you can still continue using the Sempotes, however it will be a lot less effective. So alternatively, you can use the Latham and destroy the nodules to damage the tank as usual. Finally, for Captain Janus 4. Here I used the Praedos again to increase my parkour velocity for the lasers between the first and second phase of the fight. I then used the same Latham build as before, but this time I swapped out either Hornet Strike or Lethal Torrent that you had for the tank for primed Expel Grenier, and for the primary I brought along the Felarx again. For the 4 fight, having either Boreal's Anguish or Arrow Vantage is recommended on your Warframe for the second part of the fight specifically. Apart from that, for all of the bosses I can say try to stay in the air to survive, follow the mechanics and keep dealing damage. And then you will be a-okay and those shiny glyphs will be yours. Anyhow, I hope this guide was helpful and that you've learned something which you are able to apply in your own hard mode boss fights. If there's any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments, and I wish you all good luck on getting those illustrious glyphs. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Bye. Finally, a thank you to all members of the channel. We have Nike418, Tommel, Mega Ninja, Dwang Nguyen Tai, Stud6 Ban1Y, Jumeri Coleman, Pinter Aaron, Fixin Sage, Fury Render, Ismail Pereira, Benjamin Cooper, Nocent Linux Gaming, Jalen Saunders, Ouija, Patrick Onuowa Jr., Siester MR, Deadly Dion, Unknown User 0, Shaky Laguerre, Sanathine, Don Cuyi, Altair123, Silver Fang Blackwing, Alex M, Serdacious, Gustavo Adolfo, Val Christian, Moonhowler, Zeke West, Arvis, Sliver, and Soul Surfer. Thank you.